Good to be here and really to talk about really a critical topic. Those of us who maybe don't sleep real well or have problems with sleep, understand how critical this is. For the person that has no problem sleeping, they may not realize how lucky they are because it's such a important part of not only health, but also the healing process. So, now that we know what the topic is about, I'm always asked when I do seminars or when I work with patients directly, many times I can see somebody thinking and ask, well, Dr. Yumber, what is actually the most important of all the strategies? Sometimes we want to narrow it down to, what's the most important thing that I can do? And of course, I usually quip at that point, says, well, it's the things that we're not doing, right? It's the things that we're not doing, that we're not taking advantage of, that are the most important wellness strategies in our lives. But to answer that question directly, I remember as a young teenager in high school, I was passionate about health. I had experienced the death of my mother when I was 11 years of age. I had seen her go from high vitality, energetic mother that I loved to somebody that gradually died because of brain cancer and over a period of a year's time. And that really impacted me as a adolescent. And as a teenager, I would read every book that I could on health. I was really passionate about health. And that's the reason that I'm a lifestyle medicine specialist today, is because I wanted to make sure that I was protecting myself so I wouldn't have to go through what my mother went through. And I'm passionate about helping other people to have the most vitality in their lives so they don't have to go through these diseases and illnesses that take so much of their life away from their family. Well, so the question is, what is the most important strategy? And as I contemplated this as a 16-year-old, as I read the books, and I understood that all of them were important, but if you had to start somewhere, if you had to put an emphasis somewhere, where would it be? And as I began thinking about that, I started experimenting, and I noticed something. I noticed that if I didn't get to bed at around 10 or 10:30, and I stayed up later to do homework or to watch a movie or whatever, we do as teenagers, I noticed that the next day didn't go so well. I wouldn't get up early to go for my mile jog in the snow around our neighborhood in Barron Springs, Michigan. I wouldn't necessarily eat as healthy as a breakfast. I would be tired during the day. I'd be more prone to the shortcuts that we seek to feel better. That's a very dangerous place to be. If we start taking shortcuts to feel better, right? To kind of get that cup of ambition first thing in the morning. If we need coffee to have a good day, there's a problem because that predisposes us to other drug-seeking behavior. And so I realized as a teenager that out of all these strategies, good nutrition, which we're going to talk more about next month, regular exercise, which is critical, optimal water intake, sunlight, vitamin D, avoiding smoking and alcohol, daily fresh air, proper rest, forgiveness. I mean, as powerful as forgiveness is, of all of these, if we don't get our sleep, okay, if we don't get proper rest, we are sitting ducks to be failures in everything else. And so that really begins the important discussion of what actually happens while we're sleeping. Why is it so critical? It says it's during our sleep that our muscles and tissues are repaired and grow. If you're exercising, but you're not sleeping well, you're not getting the real benefit of the exercise, because to get the benefit from exercise, you have to rest from the exercise. You have to get that recuperative and restorative healing of your muscles that takes place primarily during deep sleep when you're asleep. Okay, it's where energy restoration comes from. This is how well we do in any aspect of our life is dependent on how much energy we have. And sleep is a critical part of how much energy we have to go through the day and do all the things that we need to do. It's also the time of that 24-hour period of during deep sleep where memory consolidation occurs. Now, this is really critical, okay, because I work with a lot of people who have challenges with their memory, and we know that memory consolidation, that is the ability to remember things that were told to you the day before or the week before or something important that happened a year before. That is determined in large part by memory consolidation, and that happens while we sleep. So if we're not having good sleep, if we're having to take medications to sleep, memory consolidation isn't occurring nearly as efficiently or as effectively, and we are now more prone towards dementia as we get older. So that's an important part of sleep. Hormone production, immune restoration. There's so many things that if we're not sleeping well, the next morning our immune system is at risk. We'll see from studies that you can have a 50% decreased function of your immune system, your natural killer cell activity, their ability to kill off viruses and bacteria and cancer the next morning just by going to bed late. One night, we can have a 50% decreased function of our immune system, which means we're sitting ducks. For whatever we get exposed to that morning, we're sitting ducks because the immune system has to be more than 50% efficient in order to deal, especially with the viruses that we're exposed to today. So these are things that happen while we're asleep if we're sleeping soundly. So that's why it's important. So what are the effects of sleep loss? There's a huge problem in our society today with sleep loss. I see what's happening to our children who, even in elementary school, feel like they have to stay up late to get their homework done. I'm 60 years old now, and I don't remember ever staying up late in elementary school to get my homework done. Okay, I hardly remember that happening in high school. You got your homework done during study hall or after school. You didn't have to stay up late to do that typically. And yet, so many of our children are staying up to 1, 2 in the morning habitually just to get the grade so they can get into the college that they want. That's horrible because we're basically destroying our future lives for the sake of something that we want to get now. And so basically, there are many negative effects of sleep loss. So let's just run through some of them quickly. Increased risk for diabetes. You know that, again, just one night lack of sleep where you're going to bed like at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning instead of your normal bedtime, just one night where you stay up late, the next morning, you're more likely to be diabetic or pre-diabetic. Your blood sugars go up, you become more insulin resistant, you have a much higher risk of having a heart attack if you have risk. You have a greater risk of promoting cancer, weight gain, depression. Weight gain is a huge thing. When patients come to me and says, Doc, I need to lose some weight. Okay, one of the things that I always come back to is how you're sleeping. So I didn't come here to sleep better. I just want to lose weight. Okay, and I said, well, you're not going to effectively lose weight unless you get sleep under control, that we optimize your sleep. It impacts depression and anxiety and so many other things. One reason for this is how the lack of sleep impacts cortisol levels, the actual stress hormone. Cortisol levels go up, okay, as in the morning, especially if we're under stress and if we haven't slept well. And of course, cortisol levels causes our blood sugar levels to go up. And of course, it makes us feel more stressed, more anxious. It promotes inflammation. That almost all disease has a component of inflammation to it. When we have more inflammation, we're more likely to be prone to whatever we're genetically or otherwise predisposed to. So optimizing sleep basically also helps lower inflammation. And we're going to be talking about 10 tips for optimizing your sleep in a little bit. So I want to run through some studies here. So it increases blood pressure. We talked about how it weakens the immune system, and it changes expression to many, many genes that we'll see. Okay, so as I look, somebody doesn't have their mute on, by the way. We can hear it in the background. Okay, so as I studied this in my professional life, and as I work with more and more patients who have health issues that correspond to cognitive decline, I did some research to put this paper together for the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine in early 2018. It was entitled Clinical Lifestyle Medicine Strategies for Preventing and Reversing Memory Loss in Alzheimer's. Okay, and through my research, I discovered that one of the main challenges, one of the most fundamental things that we need to fix if we're going to prevent or reverse memory loss in Alzheimer's or in people who have mild cognitive impairment, is we gotta fix the sleep question. Now, I first noted this when I came across Dr. Dale Bredeson's research in 2014. It's a paper that Dr. Bredeson had published in the journal Aging. And in this paper, he presented 10 case studies, that showed reversal of cognitive decline. Now, this was unheard of at the time. Okay, I see it happening all the time now with my patients. But when I first read this, I go like, this is amazing. You can actually reverse cognitive decline. And of course, Dr. Dale Bredesen is involved with University of California in Los Angeles, Department of Neurology. And he, of course, is the one who later wrote the best-selling book, The End of Alzheimer's. And now he has a book out called The End of Alzheimer's Program, which is wonderful information that shows people the research that recognizes the potential to even reverse cognitive decline and certainly to prevent it. Well, in this paper that he wrote some 7 years ago, the 10 case studies, I noticed a pattern. I noticed that almost every case that they had to work on sleep in order to show this reversal. In other words, that not fixing the sleep problem is basically prevents somebody from really accomplishing what they could accomplish otherwise in reversing cognitive decline. Now, later in 2018, I had the privilege to participate as one of the researchers in Dr. Bredeson's paper published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease and Parkinsonism, which was referred to as Reversal of Cognitive Decline, 100 patients. There'd been some criticism that the other paper was only 10 patients. What does that mean? We said, okay, well, we'll do 100 patients. He's now working on one for over 300 patients. And so collectively, about 14 of us doctors put together case studies showing real live case studies of where our patients actually showed reversal of cognitive decline. Again, in the majority of these cases, a major theme came across, which is we need to fix sleep, or else we're not going to get the results we're looking for. It was for that reason that when I wrote the book Goodbye Diabetes, I had an entire chapter on addressing sleep. When I wrote the book Hello Healthy, an entire chapter on fixing sleep. And this is the book that if you can download this entire chapter from my book Hello Healthy, which is basically a book I put together for all my patients that look at strategies to reach our full health and wellness potential. And sleep is a critical piece of that. So that entire chapter, over 20 pages, is available as a free download from the Brighten Heights website. So it's also a major component as I wrote the case studies. in my book, Memory Makeover, you have to fix sleep. Now, as you look at the exposome, which is basically a theme that references everything in our lives, everything that we eat, everything that we do, everything that we say, everything that we think, everything around us in our environment, that's our exposome. Our exposome are the things that turn genes on and off. And you'll see that, we talked about exercise last month. We're going to be talking about nutrition next month. There's so many things that influence the expression of our genes. And you see, right in the middle of this exposome is sleep. In other words, sleep is at the foundational core of changing the way your genes express themselves, for good or for bad. If you're not sleeping well, if you wake up a lot at night, if you don't go into deep sleep or rapid eye movement, you're not healing, and your genes are actually being expressed very negatively. It's promoting cancer. It's promoting diseases of many kinds, promoting the expression of the diabetes genes, of the Alzheimer's genes, of the heart disease genes, and so forth. If you're sleeping well, it is turning those bad genes off and turning on the good genes. So literally, we can be turning the good genes on and the bad genes off by the decisions that we make. Now, I know that some of you are thinking right now, hey, you're preaching to the choir here. I know, I recognize, I accept that sleep is important. The problem is I can't, it doesn't work. Whatever I do doesn't work. So we're going to have 10 tips here in a few minutes. So hang in there. Now, it's important to understand, and this is actually from one of my favorite professors. He was from Yale University School of Medicine. I didn't go there, but I love to watch him on the internet as he presents his various seminars. And he called it the Thumbtack Rules, which is, so many times in medicine, we treat the symptoms instead of treating the cause, right? And so that's why sleep is so important, because unless we address the cause of disease, one of the major causes is the lack of effective, healthy sleep, then we're basically really not fixing anything. So Dr. Sid Baker, retired professor of medicine at Yale University, called it the Thumbtack Rules. He said, if you're sitting on a tack, it takes a lot of aspirin to make you feel good. Right? Does that make sense? Right? He says, but then the corollary to this, he says, if you're sitting on two tacks, removing just one does not result in a 50% improvement. The point is this, is that if you're not sleeping effectively, that's a major tack that you're sitting on. And until you fix the sleep problem, you're still going to have symptoms because of that. You're not going to have optimal health and healing potential. So then Dr. Sid Baker goes on to talk about that optimal health and the potential to heal requires that we provide all the necessary elements to optimize the system and remove any interfering elements. Now, typically, we say that the nutrients are the necessary elements. Sleep, in this case, is a nutrient. It's not a food nutrient, but without it, we are nutritionally devoid, and we're not going to benefit as much from the nutrients that we do consume. The toxins are the interfering elements. And here's the important thing to understand, that sleep is critical to remove toxins from your body, especially from your brain. We're going to show that here in a second. So in medicine and in health, we are all concerned about the ravages of aging, the negative effects of aging. And we blame most of our illness and ill health as we get older on aging, when in fact, aging in itself is not the cause of that. We refer to senility as just an obvious consequence of aging, but senility isn't, from a medical term perspective, relegated just to problems with cognitive decline. Senility simply means shrinkage of the organ in question. When something becomes senile, it is atrophying, it is regressing, it is getting smaller. So for instance, last month we talked about the senility of muscles, right? the sarcopenia, which is puny muscle disease, when we let our muscles get small and out of shape, that's senility of our muscles. Well, but we're also concerned about senility in the brain, or senility of any organ system leading to disease, like senility of the pancreas and the beta cells of the pancreas that produce insulin. If those cells become damaged or atrophy, we develop diabetes. And so type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes are referred to as senility of sorts in the pancreas. So the Mosby's Medical Dictionary defines senility as a pattern of retrograde changes occurring with advancing age and resulting in the progressive shrinking and degeneration of tissues and organs. Okay, so again, they call it with advancing age. Salupenia, which is basically atrophied health, a term that I coined, is salupenia. Salud is health in Latin and Spanish. Okay, and penia is small. So a diminishing health or atrophy of our health is defined as when system-wide shrinking and degeneration of tissues and organs associated with chronic exposure to biologic irritants, inadequate nutrients, and less than optimal stimulation or activation. Sleep, therefore, is a key part of this definition, where we're not getting rid of these toxins because we're not sleeping properly, and that creates biological irritants in the brain and the body that cause premature aging and damage to the body. So let me kind of give you a perspective on dementia. I talk about dementia because that's the ultimate goal, is for us to avoid dementia. You can talk about heart disease and diabetes and all kinds of other diseases, but ultimately all of us are at risk of developing dementia, and that should be, especially after our early 40s, that should be our primary goal health-wise, is to protect our brain and to reverse any tendency we might have genetically or environmentally for dementia. So let me have you understand this more carefully. Okay, so the dementia is referred to as I refer to it as a temporary cognitive impairment associated with acute exposure to one or more dementogens that collectively cross a threshold level, leading to decreased functionality in memory, judgment, communication, organization, and the normal cognitive functions of daily living. So here's my point. When we're not sleeping well, we end up having what I call a temporary form of cognitive impairment, otherwise known as a temporary form of dementia. I have seen that happen to many of my patients. I've seen it happen to myself as well. Okay, so the bottom line here is that, let me just tell you a quick story of myself. About 10 years ago now, my wife and I were flying to Lisbon, Portugal. I'd been asked to give a series of lectures to a very large conference in Lisbon. And you know, when you're flying west, you know, from LA, we're flying to well, actually, no, we were flying east. Okay. And my time zones just got all screwed up going all the way to Europe and Lisbon, Portugal. And I didn't sleep at all that entire flight because I was working on my talks. Plus it was daytime for me. But when I arrived in Lisbon, I was exhausted, and it was really early morning, like about 5 a.m. And so I'm thinking, oh, we got to get to the hotel and get some sleep. My wife and I were both exhausted. But when we were met by our host in Lisbon, he said, good news, I'm taking the day off and I'm going to show you Lisbon. My wife and I were horrified. Like we didn't want to rebuff our host, because he had a very busy executive, had taken the entire day off for us. And so plus we wanted to see the sights in Lisbon. It's a beautiful city. And so even though we were exhausted, we spent the day checking out Lisbon. It was just a wonderful experience. Well, the next day, you know, we were just really tired. And I was being now taken to the lecture hall to get ready for these presentations. And I was asking some questions of my host and from the back seat, and he turned to me and he looked at me like, what is wrong with Dr. Youngberg? and I kind of looked at my wife and she was looking at me the same way, like, what is wrong with you? I go like, what? And he says, you've been asking that question several times already. Oh my goodness. I was experiencing this transient dementia. Why? Because I had not slept for a long time, and that gave me an early warning signal. That told me that I actually was at higher risk of developing dementia in the future. So if you have those senior moments, okay, pay attention to when you have those senior moments, because they're not actually senior moments. They're a transient form of dementia that says you're at more risk of dementia later on unless you reduce your risk factors that are driving this tendency to dementia. And the lack of sleep is a major, major driver for this. Okay, so so let's take a look at some of the studies on sleep and brain wellness. Okay, let's see here. Okay, if somehow I don't have control over this. Okay, so somehow I got switched over to somebody else's control. I need to control this myself. Okay, let's see here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so the first thing, some of you might be thinking, oh, well, you know, I don't really have a problem.
Dr. Youngberg, we can't see your screen.
Oh, okay. So
that was the problem.
Stop sharing. Okay, so let's actually share the screen real quick. Okay, and there we go. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'm back in control. So so you might be thinking, well, this isn't really my problem, right? I don't have senior moments, etc. Says, well, if you have not been really taking care of your sleep habits, you're going to be at risk of dementia, almost guaranteed, because we know that at least 50% of us will have Alzheimer's by the time we're 85 years of age. That's just the general population, okay, not even considering other risk factors. So it's important for us to recognize that there are things associated with atrophy, with this senility of the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that does memory consolidation. And here's a study published in 2015 showing that late bedtime is associated with decreased hippocampal volume, the very part of the brain that does memory consolidation in young, healthy subjects. In other words, just going to bed late in young adults is actually been proven to be associated with atrophy at that young age to the hippocampus, which means the reserve capacity, the ability to kind of hang in there with the reserve hippocampal cell memory, short-term memory cells that we have, is going to be reduced over time, simply because as youth or as young adults or as middle-aged adults, we have not paid attention to sleep. Now, and here's a graphic showing that starting on the left, which we're looking at the relative size of that part of the brain, the hippocampus, okay? And so if somebody goes to bed at 9 o'clock, it's bigger. If somebody goes to bed at 10 o'clock on average, it's a little smaller. In other words, there's more atrophy. Somebody goes to bed at 11 o'clock, more atrophy. Midnight, which is the double zero there, that's midnight. There's more atrophy to the hippocampus, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and so forth. In other words, the later we go to bed, even just 1 hour later than optimal, means that we're going to have hippocampal atrophy and senility taking place even in our young adult years. Okay, so that's why we got to pay attention to it now. Now, one of the studies that confirms this from a genetic standpoint is that it's been estimated that sleep disruption, in other words, just not being on a good sleep schedule, ultimately impacts negatively the expression of about 1/3 of all our genes. Now, we know from the Human Genome Project that that we have about 20,000 genes, and a third of those, in other words, about 7,000 of our genes are changed in their expression when we have sleep disruption. This is really bad news for those who have sleep disruption. It's really good news for those of us that want to regain and grow hippocampal volume. In other words, you can lose cells in your memory center, or you can regain them to the tune of 1,000 new cells a day you can gain or lose, depending on the choices that we make in our exposome that I showed you earlier. So Dr. Nedegard at the University of Rochester, publishing in the Journal of Science, documents this, and this is fascinating. He says that the byproducts of daytime brain function must be detoxified at night. The lymphatic system pumps cerebral spinal fluid through the brain at night, flushing toxins into the circulation. In other words, it's at nighttime that the brain detoxifies. The brain literally squeezes down. The researchers show that the glial cells, these are the structural cells of the brain, will actually compress by over 50 to 60% to squeeze out the toxins that have been building up inside the brain cells during the day from all this mental activity. And if we're not sleeping, we're not getting rid of toxins, and therefore we're going to have more hippocampal and brain atrophy because of that. Okay, so it was John Steinbeck who said a problem difficult at night is resolved in the morning after the committee of sleep has worked on it. So in other words, there's hope, right? And so we need to take advantage of sleep so that we can make better decisions, so that we can follow all the other wellness strategies that are so critical for our health. Okay, so let's take a look here for the next 15 minutes at 10 tips for sound sleep. Okay, so the first tip is that we got to have the right bedtime and wake time. In fact, if we had to boil it down to the most important tip of all, the most important tip is to be disciplined enough to develop a system around our 24-hour day where we are consistent and regular with bedtime and wake time. Now, I'll be honest with you, this is probably one of the hardest strategies for me in the wellness and all the wellness strategies. You know, I can be really good at exercise and diet and other things like that, but there's something about wanting to get more work done, right? At night, where I'm going like, hey, if I just spend another hour on this project, I could get it done. Okay, I even did that last night as I was working on these slides, right? I said, I got to tweak them a little bit more, and I ended up going to bed, especially with daylight saving time change. I went to bed an hour late. You know what? An hour late, just 1 hour later than a healthy bedtime of roughly 10 o'clock, that is associated with a 37% increased risk for developing hypertension. You know, as we get older, hypertension is the norm. It's the rule, it's not the minority of us. The majority of us over the age of 50 have hypertension, are more likely to have hypertension. And that is increased by 37% just going to bed 1 hour later than optimal. Okay. Another thing that I briefly mentioned earlier is that other studies have shown is that if you stay up late, you know, burning the midnight oil to get a project done, and instead of going to bed at a healthy time, you go to bed, let's say at 3 o'clock. Hopefully that doesn't happen very often. The next morning, your natural killer cell function, your ability to fight off viruses drops in half, as I mentioned. And that means that we're at serious risk. So the most important strategy is to develop a discipline of saying, this is my bedtime and this is my wake time. Now, it's not that simple. We have to have the other 9 tips in order to make this one happen too. But unless we make a decision like this, we're never going to accomplish our goal. We have to decide, yes, it's important to set a regular bedtime and a regular wake time, and that includes weekends. So the reason for this is there's something that we call the circadian rhythm. Okay, if we're always going to bed at different times, waking up at different times, the circadian rhythm is confused. There's no rhythm. Okay, and that means that there's no rhythm to our hormones. There's no rhythm to how the brain repairs itself. There's no rhythm to how the body heals itself. And so we're much more prone for disease and depression and anxiety and mental confusion for that matter. So we want to be true to our circadian rhythms, and this is the first step. Now, this is really, really hard for night shift workers, okay? Or people that travel, that fly back and forth across the country. That's really rough on our circadian rhythm. And I could tell you many stories about this. And let me just tell you a quick one that happened to me when I was 28 years old. I just finished my professional training at Loma Linda University, and I flew to Singapore. So from LAX to Hawaii, and then on to Seoul, Korea, and then to Singapore. And I was doing a summer internship at a hospital in Singapore. It was actually a hospital that was named after my great uncle, who actually died in Borneo during the war. And he was well loved, a missionary to Borneo. And so it was the Youngberg Memorial Hospital that I had a chance to work at. And what happened to me was really kind of comical, but I never forgot this lesson. So I got to Singapore about 11:30 at night and got outside, and it was muggy and hot at 11:30 at night. And the president of the hospital had picked me up. And he's driving me to my apartment where I'll be staying for 4 months. And he said, "Hey, Wes, we're having a 5K run right across the street from the hospital first thing in the morning. And, hopefully you can make it." And I'm thinking, I'm all jet lagging big time. And I'm going like, I groaned inside. I don't want to run a 5K first thing in the morning. But I knew it'd be a bad start if I, as the lifestyle medicine intern, blew off the 5K. That was the big fundraiser for the hospital. So I begrudgingly got up early the next morning. It was a Sunday morning, and went and ran. I tell you, that was the most miserable 5K I've ever run. It was so hot and humid. I hadn't acclimatized to it. My chest felt like it was going to explode. But I tried desperately to make it look like it was easy, because I didn't want to show anybody that I was hurting. And but something happened after that run, because I got up early that next morning and got out into the sunshine and the fresh air and exercised. It completely reset my circadian rhythm. And I had absolutely zero jet lag after that run. So I was able to work that whole day, and then I was able to go to bed at my normal time, get up at my normal time. So I was amazed. And later I learned in my study that this is what's critical. If somebody is traveling or is involved in shift work, you have to immediately reset your circadian rhythm by getting up at the right time, getting exposed to sunlight, getting some fresh air and exercise, and that will start your biological clock over again in the right way according to that new time zone. Okay, so the next tip here is to optimize sleep environment. So the bottom line here is that we got to be really aware of our sleep environment, and that our sleep environment, number one, needs to be dark. So if somebody if the neighbor has a bright light that shines right into your window and you're trying to sleep in that environment, you're not going to get good sleep. Even if you think you are, you're not getting good sleep, because that depresses your ability to produce melatonin and therefore your ability to repair and to heal. So you have to you need to figure out how you're going to darken that out. You need to put out blackout blinds. Figure whatever you got to do, you need to black out your room, and if necessary, you need to wear a mask. You need to wear basically an eye mask to completely shut out any light, even a clock radio, even the light of your phone. Any light at all, any night light is bad for sleep and sleep recuperation and restoration of optimal health. So be in a 100% dark environment when you sleep, ideally. Okay. Number two is the temperature is critical. Okay. You have to have a cool bedroom, a cool sleep environment. The ideal temperature for most people is around 65 degrees. Now, if you live in a really hot climate and it would just cost way too much to keep your air conditioner going 24/7 to cool it down to 65 degrees, then you can use a kind of a water, one of these little water mattresses that you can put on that will cool you down right where you're sleeping, as opposed to the entire room. So the bottom line is that you need to have a cool work or cool sleep environment. The other thing is that you can't, especially you have noisy neighbors or people that have their radios on at night or early in the morning, or they're up and around vacuuming, etc. You need to have an environment where sound is not disrupting your sleep, even if that means you get some white noise. Some people use a fan, not necessarily right on them, but a fan just to generate white noise. Another thing is I've had friends tell me about an app. It's actually called White Noise. You can download it on your smartphone, and this app gives you all kinds of different options. You can listen to pink noise, white noise, raindrops, storms, trains going by. Some people sleep better when trains are going by, apparently. And anything that provide a white noise that will just kind of lull you to sleep and keep you at sleep. So make sure that you optimize your sleep environment for that purpose. Next tip is you got to wind down before bed. Okay, and this may be one of the most important tips beyond setting a bedtime and a wake time, and that is, you can't just be exercising hard right before you go to bed and wonder why you can't sleep. If I play basketball or go for a run within an hour or even 2 hours of going to bed, I'm not going to fall asleep. I'm wired from the excitement and the activity of that exercise. And so hard exercise should not be done within 2, sometimes 3 hours before bedtime. Light exercise, however, like walking after a meal, like we discussed last week or last month in our webinar, doing light activity around the house, that is actually good for you and it helps kind of calm things down. But you don't want to do hard exercise right before bed. You don't want to be having a major debate with a family member or talking on the phone regarding work, or working on a project that requires a lot of mental concentration. You don't want to be doing that within the hour or more before bedtime. Some people need to carve out a 2-hour time frame where that's wind down time. That's time where I'm just going to read. I'm going to use a light that's not bright light, that's not blue light, that's more of an orange reddish light, so that I'm not stimulating my brain to be awake, because bright light and blue light actually creates wakefulness. And so some people will even buy the blue blocker glasses and wear them for 3 hours prior to going to bed, and removing that blue light from their environment, at least from hitting their retina, that actually helps them wind down before bed so that they're more able to relax and fall asleep at the right time. So some people need to take a warm bath or take a sauna or just do something that's calming, that's meditative, that is reading a book or reading a devotional that is calming, not something that gets you upset about something. So make sure that you're winding down appropriately. Number 4, exercise. We talked a lot about this last month in the webinar series, the Vitality series. Bottom line is you don't want to exercise hard before going to bed within a couple hours, typically, but hard exercise sometime during the day, like early in the morning or in the afternoon, can powerfully help you sleep better. One of the main reasons many of us don't sleep well is because we're not exercising. And once we start a good, healthy, appropriate exercise program, many people say that right there is the best sleeping pill that they could have ever taken. Number 5, avoid a late meal. The rule of thumb is do not eat within 3 hours of going to bed, preferably 4 hours. So an early, lighter evening meal is better for you, where you're a lot of us, because we have busy work schedules, etc., tend to eat our heaviest meal at night, when in fact we want that to be ideally a lighter meal and an earlier meal. So try to eat your evening meal, like between 5 and 6, at least before 7, so that when you go to bed by 10 or 10:30, it's been at least 3 hours without any food, so that your digestive system isn't keeping you up or decreasing the restfulness and the depth of your sleep at night. Get bright light. So we want to avoid bright light and blue light in the evening, but we want to make sure we're exposed to it early in the morning or throughout the day. The general rule here is to get at least 30 minutes of sunlight a day outside, if you can. And I know that's tough for a lot of us that work indoors, but if you can get outside for your lunch break, if you can get up early enough, and if the sun is up, even if it's up just a little bit, just get outside. And I say, instead of that cup of coffee, get that cup of sunshine. Okay, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but a cup of sunshine, by that I mean you get your mug of hot water with a little lemon on it, go outside and sit in the sunshine and just bask in that sunshine, even though it might be really early morning, and that resets your circadian rhythm. Spend time outdoors, especially if you have trouble getting to sleep. And if you can't do it first thing in the morning, do it as soon as you can, but when the sun is up. Okay, but you want to do it early morning or early afternoon, not late at sundown. Okay, number 7, take a cat nap or not at all. And so the key issue here is that if you had a bad night, still get up at the regular time. Okay, get outside, reset your circadian rhythm. If you're still tired, then take a little cat nap in the morning, late morning, or maybe early afternoon, but do not take a cat nap in the late afternoon or early evening. Why? Because that's going to destroy your chances of having good sleep that night. So be careful with naps, but if you need them, take them. Most people who follow the other sleep tips actually find that they don't need to take a nap anymore. Okay, because they have so much energy during the day, they just don't even think about taking a nap. Okay, number 8, avoid stimulants and depressants. And by this primarily, we mean caffeine. Okay, so the stimulant caffeine is actually a substance that breaks down adrenal reserve capacity. One of the main causes of fatigue is that over time, I've seen many people who are busy executives, they use caffeine to keep their adrenals going. Okay, but the problem is that caffeine forces the adrenals to work overtime, which means it's creating atrophy and basically is creating senility of the adrenals, where we're losing the cells. They're being destroyed because they're overworked. Okay, and then I've seen many executives, by the time they hit 50, they just crash. Even a pot of coffee won't work anymore because their adrenals are shot. They can't respond to the caffeine anymore. And so avoid stimulants. Now, if you like got to have your cup of coffee first thing in the morning, at least limit it, right? At least limit it to morning, because especially caffeine later on in the afternoon or evening is going to more fully disrupt sleep. The main depressant that we're referring to here would be alcohol. I know many people will joke about that nightcap, help me sleep, help me get to sleep. I was struggling to get to sleep. I had a nightcap and I went right to sleep. Well, here's the problem with that. A nightcap, yes, indeed, can help you fall asleep, but it does not help you get into deep sleep, which means it doesn't help you. Okay. So what's the value of sleeping if you're actually not recuperating and restoring energy and restoration of health and healing of your tissues and your brain, right? So it's been well documented that a nightcap or having a little bit of alcohol or wine in the evening or before bedtime actually creates problems with sleep, not helping sleep. Okay, so that's important to understand. So what about sleeping pills? Why not just, if I have a sleeping problem, why not just use them, right? And benefit. Now, I'm not making a blanket statement here. I'm not judging people who feel like they need sleeping pills, but let me raise a very important point. And this is very important, that benzodiazepine, the sleep, the big, the hardcore sleep prescription medications. Okay, common examples would be Halcion, Prosom, or Restoril. The problem with these sleep inducing medications is that study after study after study have shown that just taking these for 3 to 6 months increases the risk of later developing Alzheimer's by 32%, and taking them for more than 6 months, which is what most people do, increases the risk for Alzheimer's by a whopping 84%. I mean, that's huge. And so that's a reason to ask, well, maybe there's a better option, and following the other tips could be the answer in part to no longer needing these benzos to get us to sleep. And there's the, quote, the less problematic sleep aids or prescriptive medications that are anticholinergic. Common examples of this would be Ambien, Lunesta, and Sonata. A lot of people use these as sleep aids, and it helps them sleep. But once again, these medications can downregulate acetylcholine, which is a major chemical in the brain that helps us with memory, that helps us with cognitive function, and the ability of these drugs, including these antihistamines like Benadryl, yes, even Benadryl, Tylenol, PM, Advil, PM. These medications, many of them over the counter, actually impair brain function because of how they impact acetylcholine in the brain. And it's, of course, based on the amount of the medication that you're using and the frequency and duration of use. Okay, so as we're ending up here, let's look at some simple nutritional sleep remedies that might be worth evaluating or studying further and discussing with your healthcare professionals. First of all, melatonin. Melatonin isn't for everybody. Some people who take melatonin feel groggy the next morning. Okay, but here's the catch. Melatonin, the best way to get melatonin is by following the other 9 simple remedies, right? The tips for getting good sleep. Getting outside in bright light dramatically increases the production of melatonin at night. Getting into dark environment at bedtime also increases the production and the release of melatonin at night. And also getting to bed earlier rather than later dramatically increases the release of melatonin at night. We know that the hours before midnight are oftentimes twice as effective in its restorative power and getting that deep sleep that we need, that stage 3 and stage 4 sleep that we need, than the hours after midnight. Okay, in other words, just getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night may not be enough for many of us, because the timing of sleep is just as important as the amount of sleep. Okay, so melatonin helps regulate that. So make sure you're following the natural remedies for that. But many of us could actually benefit from melatonin. Melatonin helps fight viruses. Melatonin helps heal ulcers. Melatonin helps heal the brain. And so I have many patients that take anywhere from 1 to 10 milligrams of melatonin sometime before bedtime. Other options are tryptophan, which can break down into 5-HTP. These are amino acids that the brain uses to calm down, to help induce a good sleep. So tryptophan taken at 500 milligrams or 5-HTP taken at 50 milligrams, there's a typo there, can be very effective in many individuals. Using GABA, GABA is the predominant calming neurotransmitter in the brain. You can actually use it as a supplement called GABA. And GABA at 500 to 750 milligrams can really gets into the nervous system and calms the system. I personally, one of my favorite transdermal creams is it comes in a bottle like this. It's called Calming Cream. It's available at various clinics, and it every once in a while, if my brain is working overtime and I can't sleep, I'll just put that on my wrist and rub it into my inner elbow crease. Kind of take a deep breath, and within minutes, I'm asleep. It just kind of calms the brain. So GABA and similar formulas like Calming Cream are good. Magnesium is critical. If you have restless leg syndrome that keeps you up at night, that's almost always a magnesium deficiency. It could be an iron deficiency as well. But taking magnesium, like magnesium citrate or magnesium glycinate, can help calm restless leg syndrome. But there's a form of magnesium that crosses the blood-brain barrier nicely called magnesium L-threonate. And you can take up to 2,000 milligrams of that, which sounds like a lot, but that 2,000 milligrams is mainly the L-threonate form, meaning that it's only about 140 milligrams of actual magnesium, and it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And for some of my patients who've had insomnia for decades, they started taking them all at bedtime and say, that's solved my insomnia problem. Now, that's not going to solve everybody's insomnia, but it's something worth looking into. Ashwagandha is something that can help calm us down and support the adrenal health. Young Max Sleep is a formula I use with my patients. It's a bedtime formula that has a whole bunch of different things in it that help put persons into a nice sleep mode. So those are some strategies. But let me come back full circle to the very beginning. If you got to start somewhere, you got to start right here by setting the right bedtime and wake time for you. And I love this quote from Aristotle as we finish here today. It says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." And so if you want to get restorative sleep, make sure that you turn it into a habit, not just something that you do occasionally.
Great, Dr. Youngberg. We did get a couple of questions that came in, so I'd like to share those with you. The first one said, I sleep well one night, and then the next night I have trouble staying asleep. Any suggestions? I follow a careful lifestyle otherwise.
Yeah, so I think the key here is for us to recognize that one of the causes of waking up in the middle of the night is what we refer to as reactive hypoglycemia. In other words, the first thing that I would evaluate is what you're eating that day. In other words, what you eat even for breakfast and lunch can affect your sleep that night. And generally speaking, a diet that's a low glycemic index. We're going to be talking a lot about nutrition and food next month's webinar. But what we eat can have a huge impact on how well we sleep. So that's one thing that, of course, changes from meal to meal and day to day that can influence why I slept good one night and not another night. I have patients that when they struggle with sleep, I actually evaluate their tendency to hypoglycemia by doing a 4-hour glucose tolerance test and measuring insulin and cortisol levels during that 4-hour test. And that can very effectively show the tendencies to adrenal fatigue or hypoglycemia, low blood sugars, that when your blood sugars drop, your brain will wake you up because that's dangerous. Okay. And the adrenaline that is released to bring your blood sugar back up, that's what's actually waking you up. And so we need to stabilize those hormonal ups and downs. And we do that in part by following all these tips that I mentioned.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. I know that's something I struggle with, and I'll all of a sudden wake up and my heart is pounding, and you've explained that to me. That's what's going on there. So I appreciate that. Another person put in, I think this is when you were talking about ways to calm yourself. He said, how about the rocking chair exercises before bedtime?
Well, so those are examples of things that are calming, right? So you wouldn't want your child on there making it go fast, because that's not going to help you relax, right? But rocking motions can be very soothing. Again, you want to be in a lower light environment, preferably no blue light or white light, where historically when people were up late at night, they had a candle or a fire on, and those are orange reddish lights, not white or blue lights. And so that's why a computer screen or a tablet or an iPad or a phone reading that way, that's just a lot of white light. So unless we're using blue blocker technology or blue blocker glasses, we need to avoid all exposure to that kind of light, no matter what else we're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Youngberg. A lot of great information. I know our guests got some good tips today in helping them with their sleep. So I'd like to give one last thank you for Dr. Youngberg, of course, and ask that you join us for next month's webinar. It's going to be on April 12th at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And we're going to discuss optimizing your diet to supercharge your health. And an exciting aspect of next month's webinar is not only will Dr. Youngberg be speaking with us, but we're also going to have another guest panelist. His name is Chef Ken Rubin. He's actually very well known in the culinary world and healthy lifestyle world. I'll just say it that way. So we're excited about that. In fact, he and Dr. Youngberg will probably do a bit more of a conversational style with it, really talking about it from various aspects, not just one aspect, multiple aspects of as it relates to diet and nutrition. So we thank you for your time. If you have any more questions, please go to our website, and you can also send us an email at info@brightenheights.org. And we'll see you next month. Thank you so much.